So I have finished chopping my veggies. So I have my peppers, I have my onions, I have my garlic, I have my mushrooms. And the last thing that needs to be prepped is my steak. And so, as you can remember, I do not cut meat on wooden or bamboo cutting boards because the meat, the blood, the juices can get into the wood and it's very challenging to get it out. You all have plastic, so you don't have this problem, but I am going to just put a piece of saran wrap. I'm actually going to cover up my veggies a little bit so that I can cut my meat. Also, to note with the pepper steak, I put it in the freezer for just like 10 to 15 minutes to give it some more teeth to cut with. It makes it a lot easier to cut the meat because we are going to break down a whole piece of steak into strips so that we can use it for our pepper steak. So we are working with this chuck roast today. I am actually going to open this chuck roast in a bowl because I want all the juices that are kind of in here to fall into the bowl and not onto my cutting board or onto the table. Being mindful that we're working with raw meat, and raw meat can be dangerous to work with. It has lots of bacteria and pathogens in it when it's not cooked. And so we want to make sure that we keep the meat juices separate from the veggie juices. We also want to make sure that we keep as much of the juices that are coming from this raw meat from our work surface to minimize opportunities to get sick. So I have my bowl. I also have my meat scissors, and I'm just going to open up this package. A bigger bowl would be very helpful, but I don't have one. You also could do this over the sink. As you can see, I'm splashing, so I'm going to do this over the sink. Even though my meat is frozen, I am just going to give it a rinse. It's always nice to wash your meat. Okay, so this is what it looks like all washed. It feels pretty, like when you take it out of the package, it may feel kind of sticky. After you wash it, it feels a lot better. And I'm also going to use a different knife to cut my meat than I use to cut my vegetables. All right. So to cut this meat, I'm just going to work with, as you can see, it's kind of breaking up already. So I'm just going to work with, it's actually really good to use a serrated blade, which is the blades that you all have when you're cutting meat. Um, I opted out and now I got a tougher time of it. But I'm just going to break this down. And also kind of what we saw uh, last week. You can use scissors to do this as well. A designated pair of meat scissors, not just any old scissors. That's kind of nasty. But to cut this into strips, I just like for our pepper steak, I just want this to be in little strips. So to my group that's doing this, you want a strip that looks about like that. So for speed, I'm going to switch to my scissors because I like it that way. And you can kind of just cut little pieces. This is getting stuck on the fat, so take your time. It's no rush. This is why we break our groups up how we do. Maybe I switch back to my knife, child. Okay, here we go. If you do this at home and you end up cutting on plastic like I'm doing, be mindful of not cutting too firmly. Just cut the meat, not the board. Did y'all know it's cultures that eat raw meat? There's plenty of them. I don't know if I would do that here in the States with the meat that we have. No shade. But when I was in Ethiopia, they have a dish called kifo, Kitfo, and it's essentially a semi-ground kind of chunks of meat like this that's cured with seasoning. So they just kind of season it and let the seasoning sit, and it kind of forms a crust on the meat. But they are butchering their animals right there. So the meat's really fresh, really clean. There was one person who said they wanted to learn to cook steak. The technique that we are using today is something that you would use to cook steak if we were leaving this meat whole, except for we're breaking it up because we want to be able to feed everybody. But if you are making this at home and you wanted to leave this whole, you totally could. All right, I'm going to cut that last small piece and then we're going to transition. All right, so while this is getting cut, it's an excellent time to start preheating our skillets. You all have electric skillets, so they don't take a ton of time to preheat. But when we are making steak or really any meat, We want to make sure that we get a good sear on the outside. And the best way to get a sear or to get that nice crusty brownie part that we like when we're eating the meat is to have a nice high heat cooking surface. I have also pre-seasoned my skillet with avocado oil. I need some nice pieces of fat. Um, and so you all are using grapeseed oil. We're going to use grapeseed oil or avocado oil. Are great to use because they are low in trans fats, which means that once they get into your body, they won't immediately convert into fat that's stored around your muscles and your organs, which helps to prevent things like heart disease and diabetes. But also, you can use them at really high temperatures, which means you can use them to fry and you can use them to sear, unlike something like an olive oil, which should only be used at a lower temperature. So grapeseed oil, avocado oil could be used as high as 400 degrees. You can even deep fry with them. But olive oil really shouldn't go over closer to 200. So I have my meat cut. I have my skillet preheating. I'm going to wash my hands because I just handled raw meat. I'm also going to just kind of cover up this meat so it's not touching the veggies at all. And just a note, you guys don't really have to worry about cost of things at this time of your life. But anytime you're doing something like this, I just wash my hands and then handle the meat again. Bless my heart. But anytime you're doing something like this, it is more cost effective to get a larger cut of meat and break it down yourself than it is to try to buy that same amount of pre-cut meat. And that goes for veggies, that goes for fruit. It always works out to be a better price to buy it and cut it and cook it yourself than it does to try to buy it pre-done. So as you can see, my skillet is smoking. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn the eye down. That's just the oil that I have in there smoking, which is nice. I'm going to season my meat. I'm going to put on some salt. As well as some pepper. And again, if you were doing this as a whole steak, you would do this same step. So you would season both sides. I honestly would have patted this dry first. But I'm out of paper towels at home. But you all can pat your meat dry. And then I'm also going to put on some black pepper. And if you have, I'm not sure if y'all still have any sazon. But I mean, it's not essential, but this is where when you're seasoning your beef, especially, you don't want to do too much. Because you don't want the seasonings to burn because you're cooking it at such a high temperature. So salt and pepper tend to be good. And then you can add in other seasonings later. I am going to go ahead and add some ground garlic to this because I just like garlic. It's delicious. And we love black pepper in my family, so black pepper crazy. Because you all are making food for your own consumption, you can kind of work as a team to decide when it's done, when it looks good in terms of your seasoning. Come on, baby. So we are going to make our vegetarian version of this first, which means that honestly, I need to season my mushrooms. So we're going to season up our mushrooms in very much the same way that we seasoned our steak. So I'm going to just put them in here. I'm going to add a little bit of oil. Just going to use my top to add in some oil. And then I'm going to season my mushrooms in the same way that I season my steak. So I have salt. I am putting less salt in my mushrooms than I did in my meat because mushrooms absorb flavor really, really well. They don't have as much to break through. Salting your meat helps to get it more tender, but mushrooms don't need that. So we're going to use less salt in our mushrooms than we used in our steak, but they will still be seasoned and delicious. And then I'm also going to add in my garlic powder. And I'm going to add my black pepper. Another thing that you could add to this is something like a Montreal steak seasoning, which doesn't actually have steak in it, but kind of gives a feel. Okay. I don't know where all my big bowls are. We just working with what we got. But I am going to mix up my seasonings onto my mushrooms. Very nice. I'm turning my heat back up on my pan because I want it to be nice and hot. I want to hear the sizzle when I put it into the pan. This is also a good time. I'm going to go ahead and mix in some of my garlic using my vegetable knife into this mixture. I'm using the larger garlic here because we're cooking at a high heat, so I don't want the garlic to burn right away, and sometimes the smaller pieces, they cook a lot faster. So I'm back to smoking. So I'm going to put in my mushrooms.
Pause for a second.
Pardon?
Pausing for a second.
Oh, okay, cool. This is it's cooking up very nicely, and the last thing that I'm going to add to this is just a pat of butter, and I'm going to remove it from the heat. So a pat is about a half tablespoon. If we wanted to do this as vegan versus vegetarian, we would use a plant-based butter. Nice. All right. So I'm going to take my mushrooms off of the heat. And the next thing I'm going to add to my skillet is my peppers and onions, starting with my onions. I'm also going to add the rest of my garlic. And then the last thing I'm going to add is some thyme, which I wanted to kind of show the difference between good thyme to use and bad thyme. And so this thyme here has kind of gotten wet. So one thing to note, that if you're not going to use your herbs right away when you buy them in these little containers, it's a good thing to just take them out and let them hang dry so they completely dry out. Otherwise, they get wet and they kind of get moldy and black like this. So you could still use this for something like maybe put it in your bath, or I'm just like, what do I use this for? It still smells great. It doesn't smell moldy, but I just would not use this to eat. So for something that we want to eat, we want it to be bright green like this. And if you have green bits in your black bits, you can just pick them out. But to use our thyme, we're just going to take our sprigs and just kind of take off these leaves into our container. Thyme tends to be woodier, so it can be kind of challenging to cut with a knife sometimes, but not impossible. So if you wanted to cut it with a knife, you could take several of the sprigs, the more tender sprigs from the woody base that we have here, and just sort of chop it. And I like to stack it on top of each other. Once you get to the woody part, it's a lot harder to chop, and you can just leave that to the side. All right, so I'm going to let that cook down a little bit. You can add more time if you like, or less time. It's really up to you. Ooh. And to just pull it off like this, you're going against the way that the leaves are growing, which can be kind of tricky sometimes. But we have our peppers and our onions sauteed, so I'm actually going to take those off as well. So you can see it's just like a light kind of saute caramelization. Not, you didn't want to cook the life out of it. Just enough. And we're gonna let the heat on our pan come back up before we put the steak in. Add some avocado oil. So we want our meat to get nice and brown. So I'm just making sure that all the pieces are touching the skillet bottom. You can kind of see that it's getting like kind of, the color is changing even on the side that you can see. That's a good sign. So while this is getting a nice sear, you want to just let it sit without moving it. Actually, I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit. I'm going to check on the potatoes. So our potatoes are just about tender. So I'm actually going to leave the top off because I want the liquid to reduce a little bit. But that's good stuff.
And then when they say let her cook.
I actually need to step into the other room.
The pause.
Yeah. Okay. So as you can see, we are getting a nice brown on our meats. Which is very nice. We don't want to overcook the meat at this stage because we are going to continue to cook it in the pan. And then because you all are reheating it before you are cooking it, before you're eating it, that's another thing to be mindful of. And so we have a nice good brown. So the next thing I'm going to do is, I don't know what I want to do first. I'm going to add in my tomato paste. So I'm using this tomato paste in the tube because it's great for when you don't really need that much. You don't need a whole can's worth. So I'm just giving it a good squeeze. And the tomato is going to add some nice savoriness. I'm also going to add some thyme to our steak directly. It's already in our peppers and onions, but we're going to add it here as well. You can also add rosemary in here. I'm going to come back. I'm going to add in 2 tablespoons of butter. Your recipe may be different because I'm just cooking the amount that I would eat for my family. So your recipe will have a little bit more than mine. But we're just going to let that kind of simmer and get busy in there. So already it has a nice gravy on it, but we're going to take it up a notch with the gravy and just kind of get some room in our pan and put in some cornstarch. You can also do this with flour, but this helps to thicken up our sauce that we're going to make a gravy. It's actually better to use a fork for this. I'm going to use a spatula because that's what's close by me right now. And to this, I'm going to add in some beef broth. You could use beef stock. You could use vegetable. You could use chicken if you wanted to. So you can see my cornstarch is thickening up my gravy. And at this point, I'm going to add in half of my peppers and onions that I made and garlic. Well, that's a little more than half. I apologize to my veggie folks. And at this point, if you wanted to add in some more pepper or garlic or salt, it's a great time to taste. So can I get a little piece? Ooh, burn me. All I want is a little taste. That is it. I think mine need a little bit more pepper. Fun fact on this recipe, this is one of my grandmother's favorites. And my granny is no longer here with us. And so it's really nice to learn how to cook our family recipes for when those people are not here anymore. So that's how we finish off the pepper version of this dish. Or excuse me, the steak version of this dish. For the mushrooms, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull this off of the heat and finish off the mushrooms.